Hello and welcome to The Green Room by Deloitte. This is the podcast where we ask the tricky questions about the world around us. I'm George Parrett, and today we're asking, 1 year on, did anything go to plan? Yes, thank you so much for downloading the podcast. The Green Room is back, possibly by popular demand, but the gang is back together. I've got Ethan Worth and Lizzie Elston here today. Hi guys, how are you?
Hey George, yep, doing well, thank you. Managed to kick my husband out of the study for this one, so I'm feeling in control.
Hi George, yeah, interesting to think our first virtual podcast, and just to think 6 months ago we were safely mingling together at the Corporate Content Awards.
Absolutely, yeah. It's more the green rooms rather than the green room, isn't it? But yeah, no, the gang is back together, and I think 6 months ago we were talking about sort of fairly innocuous things like Brexit and all that sort of stuff. But after a 6 month hiatus, they couldn't keep us away. So who's going to say a global pandemic is going to stop the Green Room podcast? And yes, I think I'm sure we all picked up some interesting lockdown habits over the last few months. I know I had a couple of weeks where I adopted juggling, which is slightly odd, and I purchased some magic tricks as well to entertain my daughters. But did any of you have any quirky habits which you took up?
I think for me, my lockdown experience was a bit different from everyone else's. So I was supporting on the national testing program. So I spent the first couple of months huddled in a government war room, probably working longer hours than I ever have before. But yeah, of course, on those lockdown evening and weekends, the odd dance routine came out with my girlfriend and I. Learning the Friends New Year's dance, I think, was probably my highlight.
Has this been uploaded to TikTok or somewhere for the world to see?
It's been uploaded to a few private WhatsApp chats where hopefully it will remain.
I think my biggest thing coming out of lockdown and sort of habit, I guess, was just making the most of the quiet roads and getting my son comfortable cycling on roads. We rediscovered our town. We were out in the countryside. We had the most wonderful bike rides.
Excellent.
That was something that we just wouldn't have probably done otherwise. So that's
putting us all to shame there, Lizzie. And, but no, I think that's it. And the thing is, we've got the team behind the podcast has pulled together a fantastic series ahead. So there's loads of really, really great topics coming up. We're going to talk about Black History Month. We're going to talk about how the travel industry has been impacted by the pandemic and all sorts of other really interesting topics. But to kick things off, we have a former guest of the Green Room podcast on the show today, and I'll let Ethan introduce him.
Yes, so today, George, we're joined by a special returning guest. I think most of our listeners will be familiar with him. It's Richard Houston, our Deloitte UK and North and South Europe CEO. Hi, Richard.
Thanks very much for having me back. Seems like only yesterday, doesn't it, that we were chatting this time last year. Nice to see you and Lizzie and Ethan.
Great to have you back, Richard.
Thank you.
Great to have you back. And do you have any fond lockdown hobbies that you've picked up at all?
Well, I'll tell you one thing that I did pick up that wasn't quite expected is we've adopted a cat. We went in March, our local RSPCA. We were sort of one of those sort of Friday night Amazon type things, and we really wanted a cat. When RSPCA, there was a tabby locally, and picked him up 2 weeks later, and he's become a fully fledged member of the Houston household. So wasn't quite expecting that, but he's a fabulous addition.
What's his name?
His name's Murtar, or we call him Murty for short.
Shout out to Murty.
Yeah, he'll be listening.
And despite being completely virtual on this occasion, we still have an icebreaker challenge, I think, Lizzie.
We have indeed, and here we go. 2020 has been a year of highs and lows. What's been your favourite memory over the past few months?
I don't mind jumping in there. I think one other habit which I didn't quite I wasn't planning on sharing, but I've got two daughters, and again throughout the lockdown period, I have had some fantastic coloured toenails during this time. So I think I'm wearing a sort of dashing fuchsia sort of colour at the moment.
So maybe I'll chip in. And I'm not sure it's quite a highlight, but it was definitely something different. Cutting the lawn actually has been a bit of a highlight. It's one of those things that's quite therapeutic, straight lines, time on your own. It's really noisy, so it's the only time you can listen to some music. You know, I'm a big music fan. And so actually cutting the lawn is actually, I wouldn't say it's been the total highlight, but it's definitely been one of the highlights.
I guess what can I say? I think I've mentioned the bike rides, which have been good for the soul. And I think, certainly in the early days, the Zoom calls really did come to the rescue, both at work, but also socially. And numerous fun, fancy dress parties, etc., were had.
So let's get stuck into this week's big question, which is 1 year on, did anything go to plan? And Richard, last time you were on the show, we asked you whether starting a new job ever got easier. And now we're wondering whether it actually gets much harder. If you had to describe your last year in 3 words, where would you start?
Yeah, okay, George, I'll have a go. Zoom, change, and opportunity. And the Zoom... look, a year ago, I think if you'd have asked me about Zoom, I'd have thought it was an ice cream. I don't think I'd ever contemplated using Zoom. And, we've used it so extensively, and actually it's held up incredibly well. I don't know, the firm, moving to work remotely makes a huge difference. Whilst it's not the same, but actually having a window in to see other people is really, really helpful, both from a firm perspective and talking to colleagues and understanding how they are, but from a people and dealing with client perspective, you get a window into somebody else's room or house that you'd never had in a business environment. So Zoom would be one. Change because, everything's changed. The rules have changed, the market's changed, the firms changed, our clients have changed, we've changed. And therefore, it just feels like that's a word that is going to be with us for a while. But at the same time, and you'll probably remember this from last time, it's opportunity. I'm a big optimist, and I really see everything as an opportunity. From, the opportunity, as Ethan was describing, to provide help and support at a time of national need, through to the opportunity to spend more time at home, have more dinners with my wife and my 2 girls. And so it's lots of different things, but definitely Zoom, change, and opportunity, George. They would be the 3 ones that probably spring to mind first.
And I think, perhaps if we just go straight to the heart of the question, I think a year ago we were talking about uncertainty around Brexit, the audit debate, and other sort of underlying factors which are still present. But how did anything go to plan in that sense?
I think that's a fabulous question. Did anything go to plan? Probably nothing like as much as I expected. I'm not sure if a global pandemic was in the small print or something, and I just didn't see it, or it was on the risk radar and somehow I didn't see it. But dealing with a global pandemic in my first year was probably pretty unexpected, and therefore a lot of the things that we were planning to do probably didn't happen in the same way. I think there were some things that were important. One of the things was that we wanted to lead on the audit reform agenda, and we continued to do that, albeit virtually, and that's carried right the way through to our recent announcement around the appointment of the Audit Governance Board and leading the profession. So I'd say that has gone to plan. I'd also say that we still wanted to grow and build our business, and particularly around the digital and technology agenda. And we managed to complete the acquisition of Keytree, our SAP digital and design consultancy. So that went to plan. And I think if there was something culturally that I was trying to do, and I always had in the back of my mind about having a sort of more open, honest, engaging communication style and engagement with everybody, with the market, with our clients, and particularly with our people and our colleagues within the firm. I think it was an opportunity to try that in spades and to really demonstrate whether or not we were able to do that. And so I'd probably say that went to plan. But there were The plan itself didn't go to plan, and so actually there were several things that didn't quite make it. But there were a few things that we've managed to sort of steer through the year, and I think some constants is no bad thing.
And obviously, talking about things going to plan or otherwise, you told us at the last time you were in that you had taken part in a Deloitte transition lab. I imagine you look back now at your 180-day plan and laugh somewhat. How do you feel about that now?
I laugh a bit at the first sort of 100 days, but the stakeholder bit was really helpful. And thinking about the key strategic things that we're trying to do, because one of the things when you're in the middle of a pandemic and you're dealing with some very immediate issues, sometimes it's easy to lose sight of what you really want to do, and therefore those sorts of things are really important, really important.
And if you were in that transition lab, but you had all the information that you do now, if you had that perfect risk register, what piece of advice would you give yourself?
I think if I knew what I was about to go through, I think I'd have been pretty nervous, actually. I think I'd have been slightly apprehensive of what was coming. I think there's several pieces of advice I would give myself. I think the backbone is you stay true to the values and who you are, and your belief in doing the right things at the right time. Come back to that communication point, really important. I think speed and agility is really important, and it trumps lots of analysis. And that's sometimes difficult in a big firm where actually there's a desire to sort of analyze every single perspective, and in reality, speed of decision making is more important. So I think there's some things there that I'd probably emphasize, and I'd probably have said get a better coffee machine at home.
Yeah,
so important. And Richard, I mean, we've talked about the amount of change and obviously the unexpected that has happened. And you are a self-described optimist. I hope you don't mind me asking, but has there ever been a time during this when you've just wanted to crawl under a rock and want it all just to go away? Or have you managed to keep your optimism?
I'm naturally a fairly positive person, but, absolutely. There are times when I've been looking for the rock. I haven't quite crawled under it, but there's definitely been a couple of times I've been looking for a rock. I remember my wife has a veggie patch in the garden, and there's a couple of times I remember going out there and thinking, oh my goodness, how on earth am I going to deal with all of the things that we're trying to deal with? My wife's fabulous. She said, well, these beans look fabulous, don't they? And I was like, yeah. And maybe a little perspective at times, I think. And that's, support of family and friends. I'm sure we've all found when things are difficult. I know I'm not the only one who has suffered from some real challenges of working in lockdown, but support from family and friends is really important. So I think a couple of times I've looked for the rock, but I've never actually crawled under it. Interestingly, I do believe it feels like I've had 3 years experience condensed into 6 months. And you come out the other side, I'm much more confident about what I'm doing, where we're going, how we take decisions, how we engage both our clients and also our people. And so, there are some positive things that have come out.
Yeah, and I think everyone has experienced this national crisis differently, having a complete range of experiences. But you must have been busier than you ever have before, I imagine. So did you manage to find any time for balance, or?
It's I think Ethan, balance is quite interesting. I think I talk a little bit about less work rather than no work, and less work is days when we do less work I think is quite good. The sense of responsibility is pretty significant, and when you're the CEO, all roads lead to you, even if you were unexpected them. So it might not be something happening inside the firm; could be happening something outside the firm that needs an appropriate response. But yeah, I do. I mean, I still do my Zoom gym sessions twice a week, early in the morning. I tend to get them over with early. I'm not sure. I actually say that's because my day gets busier. I actually think it's psychologically I just like to get the exercise done and out of the way. But that's personal time, thinking time. It's good. So That's been important. But it has been sort of busier than usual, I'd say, Ethan. Definitely busier than usual over the last.
I can imagine.
I think just to that point, it is around that connection with your family, friends, and colleagues. And I'm delighted to hear, Rich, that you're going to host a Zoom workout session for the whole firm, which is great. So that sounds really good. Yeah,
I'd love to do that, George. As long as you turn up.
Oh yeah, I'll turn up. Yeah, that sounds good. But I think one of the great initiatives I found personally from the firm, it's a huge firm of I think 20,000 people in the UK, and during that time, in order to try and foster that connection with colleagues, Deloitte set up a coffee club program, which was I won't do it justice particularly describing it, but my experience was you got paired up with a random person from somewhere in the firm, and you had to half an hour coffee session with them, and it was fantastic to sort of learn about another colleague in another part of the business. And I know you did this.
I did
as well. Richard.
How did you find that experience? With Chloe in God, it must have been about April, and we've continued every month since. So it's been fab. Well, I think it's been fab. You'd have to ask Chloe whether she thought it had been fab. But we are still, we get together every month. We chat about what's going on. She gives me feedback about some of the things that are going on in the business. Ethan, she's just joined the testing program. She's come out of the work that she did on Cabinet Office. And it's been great. It's been great to hear what's happening in her life. It's been great to share what's happening in my life. And I think it's that connection, your point, George, about having other people and finding different sorts of connections at a time when, you're focused very much remotely, I think has been really, really important.
No, and it must be amazing to get that kind of link up from the ground. And as you mentioned, you said that she was working on the testing program. In terms of not just the testing program, but all the projects that we've done to kind of support the national response to this crisis, are you proud of how the firm has helped drive this?
I'm massively proud of what our firm is doing. At a time of national need, when there is so much difficulty and challenge, seemingly impossible tasks. Someone described, I think it was a client described the testing program and like setting up an organization, infrastructure, people, backbone, similar to the BBC in a matter of days. Mm-hmm. And, that sort of scale of challenge, and we're at the heart of it. Clearly we're one of, I think it's 40 public and private organizations that are part of that. But for our firm to be engaged, and I think, as you say, the experiences, all the people that I talk to that have been on that program feel a huge sense of responsibility, but a huge sense of pride about what they've achieved and the real difference. We talk about making an impact that matters. Yeah. And what sort of impact could matter more? And I just think it's wonderful. And I know the press is often difficult and often misinformed about our role and what we're doing. But I know that every single person who has been on that program has a huge sense of real achievement and know that they've made a massive difference to the recovery of this country. And I think that will stay with them forever.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking from me personally, I'm definitely proud of what we've achieved. And I also think it's been a great learning experience. So as you mentioned, just the sheer speed and scale, and also just working side by side with clients, with the NHS, with public health, with people from industry. It's been a real learning experience as well. So privileged to be a part of that.
And you mentioned the pride aspect. I guess it's an opportunity where our sort of purpose and principles have really been put to the test. Are there other examples where that's come to the fore over this period?
Well, I think that's right. I think COVID has shone a real light on the responsibility of businesses to do the right thing. And, that could be anything from, helping organizations deal with climate. It could be sourcing ethical supply chains. It might be creating safe data, governance. It could be any one of these number of different things that we help. But I think there's a much greater visibility and obligation on business to have a real sense of social responsibility. And I think that's no bad thing. And it's good that we feel that we're at the heart of that and continuing to lead.
And Richard, I think a year ago we discussed your new role and how sometimes it's sort of lonely at the top, and you talked about actually how you have a really supportive team. The last 6 months or so, there've been some pretty tough decisions have been made, I imagine. And how did you work with your team, closely around you, and how did you sort of support each other?
Yeah, I mean, team is hugely critical. I mean, we are a people-based business, and supporting each other through difficult decisions is really important. And what sort of a team do you need? You need a diverse team, because you need a team that actually has different perspectives and different points of view, and that can look at the decisions that you're taking through different lenses. And I think that's hugely important, particularly on difficult decisions. If everybody's thinking the same, you all think that decision is fine. But actually, if you've got different perspectives, either from gender, ethnicity, age, from any background, experience, all these things, and you're looking at something in a different way, you get a wholly different perspective. And I think, the first thing is that, all those decisions that we took were difficult. I think there is, I come back to the point I made earlier around speed of decision. I think you could spend a lot of time working out lots of different answers. And I think at the time, you have to be able to make a decision, stick with it. And also you have to recognize that there may be decisions that you take that are wrong and that need to be changed or altered. And you should feel pretty comfortable telling people that actually you took this decision on the best information you had at the time, but possibly it wasn't the right one and things have now changed and therefore you're going to do X. And it comes back to that point around transparency and openness and honesty. And I think all our clients, and I know all our people in the firm want, is to understand the logic and have an honest conversation as to why you're trying to do things and why you think they're in the best interest of protecting the firm and protecting the business. So I do think that team has been massively important. And I think speed of decision making is also really important, and also recognizing that you might get things wrong, and in which case you should admit it and change things and move on.
And do you think the decisions you made in that sort of crunch points, have they paid off? Do you think?
I think as we come through Q1, all the decisions we took, people related decisions, have definitely paid off and have given us a much securer start to FY21. I think that's really encouraging. I have to thank everybody who undertook the reduced working week. I know that was incredibly difficult, but it made a material difference. I think it's been very hard on our people around some of the decisions that we're taking, but they are, I can confirm, and I think Stephen shared in the webinar today, that they are actually making a real difference, and they're putting us in the best possible position in a period of significant uncertainty, which is exactly what we wanted at the time.
I think what's been massively appreciated, and in fact, I was talking to somebody just before we started recording, is just the appreciation of the communication, which clearly you've recognised and your team has recognised that, as people at Deloitte, having that ongoing communication to keep us updated on what's going on is so appreciated.
Well, I as I said earlier, it's a personal thing. It matters to me. I've told people before that they can email me and they can ask me questions. I get quite a lot, and I reply to them all. I don't always reply to them straight away because things are, can be a bit busy. But I do, I want to know if there are things that are in the business that I can help with, or things that aren't working, or things that people are concerned about. I can't change what I don't know, and I'm genuinely interested. And I keep, reminding everybody we're a people business, and therefore how our people feel about being part of Deloitte is really important, especially now.
Kind of on this theme of purpose and principles, of course, COVID-19 hasn't been the only major global challenge. There's also been the renewed focus on racial injustice brought to the fore from the killing of George Floyd. So I was just wondering how we as a firm have responded to that and how we've reflected our purpose and principles in that arena.
Well, it's really interesting. We we came out reasonably quickly on the killing of George Floyd, but we took a while to put together and articulate our Black Action Plan. And that was very deliberate. And the reason it was deliberate is because I wanted, and Dimple and I spent a lot of time talking about this, I wanted it to be specific things that we were going to do within the firm that will lead to sustained change in the firm. Because it's not just about George Floyd. When we listened to all the wave of feedback from a variety of people across the firm, there was a whole series of things that we needed to deal with and respond to. And therefore, we wanted the opportunity to give some thought and some consideration. And here we are 2 months later, and I was talking to Dimple, and we had a presentation at the UK Executive yesterday, actually, about it. And we're making great strides. We're doing really well around the execution of the plan, what we're doing around our mandatory training, what we're doing around mentoring, what we're doing around improving and changing the way in which we recruit and retain people, our external relationships where we're doing something with the Stephen Lawrence Trust. So there's all these things that are happening, and I've said to Dimple, we need to get some time with our people in October to share and say, look, we did take a bit of time, but we came back with something specific, and the benefit is here are the things that we're doing, and here's how we feel it's making a difference and will lead to some lasting change. So, I again, as we all know, wasn't quite expecting that sort of a challenge to rise up in the business, but I think it's again how you respond and how you communicate and engage, and how you drive lasting change, not just how you respond in the moment. So I'm very optimistic about what we're doing around that and how it will also impact our broader ambitions around diversity.
No, absolutely. I mean, I've read our Black Action Plan, and I think the commitment to tangible targets is really important. And then also, as you said, driving that lasting change through commitment to regular updating on the progress towards those, I think is key.
And another sort of thing that came in a bit not completely unexpected, but obviously will have taken up a lot of your focus is the operational separation of our audit business, and how we've been responding to that. What's going on there?
So, I think the audit reform agenda has been bubbling around for the last 2 or 3 years, following some of the very high-profile corporate collapses. We've had a number of different reviews into it, the Kingman review into the regulator, the Bryden review into the audit product, the CMA review into market competition, all tied together with Bayes and government. And we've had a series of things that we've been looking at. And I think our view, and I talked to Stephen, is we wanted to lead the profession. We wanted to actively engage. And again, as it comes back from me, it's about not just committing to change, but actioning and visibly demonstrating that you are changing. And therefore, Stephen and I were very keen that with the change in the regulator, that we would actively engage, support, work with them to provide our input and advice to the issues that they're dealing with. And when the operational separation principles came out in July, I think, we were quite pleased that they were well aligned with the direction of travel we had proposed. And whilst there are always going to be some things that we would like to change or tweak or do slightly differently, perhaps around some of the things that are in the ring fence, but they're all workable, we were keen to take a lead in the profession. And when we say we're committed to audit reform, well, let's show that we're committed to audit reform. So we announced the appointment of Baroness Margaret Ford as the chair of our audit governance board, which will start from the 1st of January next year, and a series of additional INEs. And we're very clear that we see that as a step forward. It helps transparency, improve governance, and we believe that it's an important step forward in the audit reform agenda. Clearly, it's not the only thing that we think that we should be doing, but we wanted to be leading the profession, and our press announcement around that was supported with a supporting press announcement from the FRC and the regulator. So we think we're doing the right sort of things, and this comes back to me about controlling the narrative and ensuring that we're putting our point of view forward about how we are making progress and supporting, rather than perhaps always being responsive to what the media might be asking. So see more of that. I think you may have heard that we've got our annual report coming out next week. And again, it's another example for us to showcase, alongside our financials, which are important, all the fabulous things that we are doing to support our clients, our own business and our people, and also society.
I suppose, Richard, what you're kind of alluding to, and it's it's similar to the advice that we've been giving to our clients during this sort of tricky, turbulent year, as they kind of respond, recover, and thrive from the pandemic and other headwinds facing them. But it is about that agility, isn't it? And having to adapt to market conditions, regulatory requirements, whatever it is. And I suppose, perhaps could you talk about how else we may have adapted as a business during this time, or how we're evolving, I suppose, as an organisation, looking ahead as well, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think agility is critical. This is about how do we make speedier decisions? How do we enable our people to serve our clients more effectively? Clearly adopting technology, the adoption of Zoom has been an important part of that, and remote working and enabling. We're doing more, and there's more to come on that side around digitizing our own firm. We've also, in terms of the leadership and executive appointments, with Stephen stepping into his UK managing partner role, we're trying to ensure we can streamline decision making and clarity around how the business runs and operates. And I'll come back to the audit governance board again as something important, as how we have effectively responded to what we see happening in the market. So I think there's several things that we see and as to how we are being agile, but in reality, agility never stops. So we need to be, as an organisation, consciously looking out of the organization as to what's happening in the market with our clients, with the competitors, with broader society, with government, and thinking about what changes do we need to make in order to be not only a better and stronger business, but a more impactful business in society. So it's both, I think. And agility is, frankly, I was talking about it a year ago in around our ambition. And I have to say, I probably hadn't thought I'd needed quite as much agility as we had in the last 9 months. But it remains, I think, it's critical on any business agenda. Agility and resilience, they're the two things that businesses are really focused on.
You can't get more agile than transitioning 20,000 people to work from home overnight and continue to serve. It was remarkable,
Lizzie. I mean, I don't know if you remember, we did an all-firm test on the Tuesday. By Friday, it was close of play Thursday. The entire firm was working remotely, and I'm not giving away any secrets. I remember talking at the executive in the middle of 2019 about a desire to have more remote working, and I'm not going to name any of our businesses, but certain of our businesses said that was not possible. Uh-huh. And here we are. Within 4 days, we actually had our entire 20,000 people working remotely, and believe it or not, nothing really went wrong. So I think change adoption, I think, is and that agility is quite important.
And do you think that kind of flexible working, do you think that will be a change that's carried on into the post-pandemic world?
I think it's here to stay, Ethan. I really do. I think for lots of reasons. For some people, it actually represents a better way of working. Mm-hmm. For some people, actually, they'll need to come back to the office to do certain things. I think, but the old way of sort of being in the office 5 days a week, I just don't think it's going to come back. I think in reality, we may be in there 2 or 3 days a week, but there'll be some days where we can work from home. And I think that'll have implications for what we want in our office, because you don't necessarily want a lot of desks in our office if actually you're working from home. When you're in the office, it's more collaboration, workspace, client space. So I think there's all sorts of implications. And you think if you're working from home more, well, do you need a home office space? And how does that work? What does that look like in terms of the benefits that we offer our people? So I think there's quite a whole series of things that are wrapped up with what we advise our clients on, called the future of work, which we're looking at ourselves. But it's going to take some time as we go through some of the volatility that we've perhaps been seeing at the moment around being in the office and then not being in the office. Once we get through that, we'll be able to have a clearer picture of the business that we want to be and how we can best support our clients and our people work most effectively.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be interesting to see if our clients, which I imagine they are, have had a similar shift and needing less face time, working more flexibly themselves.
I think so. I mean, I genuinely do. All the CEOs and execs that I've spoken to are all looking at and dealing with this issue. Some are in different stages of thinking about where they are in terms of needing to be back or not. But all of them are thinking about the implications of what this means for their business and their workforce and their own customers and clients.
And how about you personally? Do you think you'll be working more flexibly?
I think I will. I think I definitely will. I mean, there are definitely days when it's quite nice to be at home. I was in the office a couple of days last week, and it was quite nice to be in the office for a couple of days. I don't think we should ever underestimate the power of personal connection. I said it earlier. You don't bump into anybody on Zoom. You do bump into people walking around the building, walking in and out the building, and therefore that connection time and just is I think is really important. We're a people-based business. We're a creative business. I think that's really important. So I never see it, for me personally, perhaps being 100% one way or the other. But the hybrid, I think, will be quite good. And I think it's definitely, for me, it's a pretty big change.
I'm starting to wonder about not bumping into people on Zoom, whether we start gate crashing each other's Zoom meetings.
I have. I don't know if any of you have actually accidentally picked up the wrong link and joined something. I joined somebody's team meeting by mistake, and all I could say that there was a look of horror when I appeared. I accidentally, joined the Zoom link. Yeah. But hey, and I think George was talking earlier. I did have an executive meeting where my cat obscured the camera. So Murty sort of all of a sudden, I don't think it was really obvious. It just sort of looked like a set of stripes moving across the screen. Could have looked like sort of interference from a telly in the 90s. But it was, I mean, all things are possible on Zoom. Yeah. All things are possible, except bumping into people. In
the meeting that you gate crashed, I bet they thought they'd done something either really right or really wrong.
I just... The thing is, that picture, I need to change my Zoom picture because that Zoom picture has been sort of everywhere. So people immediately know it's me. I think if I had a different picture, I think it would be a little bit easier to sort of slip in and slip out of a meeting. But there you go. It's I'm sure they'll remember it.
Indeed.
And Richard, we've spoken a lot about the last year and how things possibly didn't quite go to plan, but how we've adapted to that. Could you perhaps talk about, what you hope might happen over the next year? I know, obviously from experience, we can't count our chickens exactly, but, what do you have in store for the year ahead?
So, that's tricky. I'd love a bit of stability, would be good. I think we always were concerned about a second wave, and I think we're heading in that direction. I think that as we go into winter is a bit of a worry. There are lots of other headwinds around unemployment in the economy and corporate challenges, and then we've got sort of Brexit looming and US elections. So there's lots of challenges and concerns. But I do think our business is pretty resilient, and I think we've demonstrated over the last year that we're able to navigate some of these things successfully. I think our original thinking about what the first quarter in this year might look has proved to be we're actually proving to have a stronger quarter and a stronger start to the year than we expected. So that's all positive. But I think it's impossible to predict what will happen. I think the only thing that I know is that we'll need to be agile, we'll need to be responsive, we'll need to continue the honest, open style of engagement and communication. And I know that whatever I plan to happen, there's going to be one or two things that just throw us slightly off beam. But I've learned how to deal with that now, George. So I'm feeling, I shouldn't say it. I'm feeling more confident in how we navigate some of the challenges moving forward. And I feel immensely supported by the team, the partnership, and all of our people in the UK. I really do. And that gives me great strength and confidence, and hopefully it should give everybody in the business strength and confidence.
And how about for you personally? You spoke on the last podcast about being a big music fan, the odd Avicii concert. What are you most looking forward to in the post-COVID world?
Oh, that's interesting. It's funny actually. I've been actually, whilst I've been sort of working, I've been listening to film scores and film music. So I've been through a lot of Howard Shore and the Lord of the Rings. Mm-hmm. I've been through a lot of Ramin Djawadi and Game of Thrones. It's sometimes my family are wondering what's happening in the office. There's some fairly sort of loud, sort of fairly progressive music happening, and what exactly is going on? And is that a good day or a bad day? And I think music is a great. I find it helps me to think. So lots of different things this time, and in a slight sort of change of tack from my normal house and dance music. Who knows what will come next, Ethan? Could be anything.
Who knows? It's fitting for the dramatic times that we're in.
Yeah, it's quite slightly spooky at times, actually. A couple of things. It's like you just got to make sure you don't have it on when you're in a meeting. People start to worry.
Well, thank you so much, Richard, for coming back to the Green Room in these strange times and after a fairly strange year as well. But it's been a fascinating discussion as ever, and hopefully we'll have you back. And who knows what the world has in store for us next year? But I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about. Thanks very much, George. Delighted to be here. Let's talk again. Who knows what it'll be like this time next year?
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks a lot, Richard. It was great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Green Room by Deloitte. We'll be back next time with another big question. This podcast is produced by our very own pod squad and hosted by George Parrett, Lizzie Elston and Ethan Worth. Thanks to our creative studio for their technical support, original music by Ali Barrett from our consulting team.